Welcome back to Training Module 6, our special programs Training 2. Again, you are watching this if you are likely an attendant, training to be an attendant on a bus, or if you are an eventual sped driver, or actually, I got to get that out of my head, is our special programs bus driver. We want to make sure you're comfortable or at least informed of all the different restraints, securement systems for our school buses, and we kind of introduced you to that over the last program, or the module number 5. Want to give you an opportunity to talk about specifics on the bus and what it actually looks like on our buses whenever you're securing a wheelchair, and specific attendant responsibilities, and just a few other items that we're going to go over. So let's proceed now with just trying to be kind of familiar with the external parts of a bus that include your wheelchair lift. When you see the wheelchair lift, it's obviously on the side of the bus toward the rear of the bus on a special programs bus. It has a pretty sizable door that you'll open up. It's got a secure strap that you can tie to the wall or the outside wall of the bus to make sure that the wind doesn't catch that door. But you're going to see these 3 components that you need to be familiar with. The first component that you need to be familiar with is this on-off switch for the lift. And this switch is located typically by the driver's compartment, by the driver's steering wheel area, where you'll see all the other switches associated with the bus. Those switches, some will be air conditioner switches, different light switches, and this particular unique switch, so you usually identify it with the word lift on the switch or a picture of a wheelchair handicap signal on the bus, on the switch itself. And this switch has got to be on in order for this box and this whole unit to operate. If this thing is off, it will not, these units together will not be able to operate. And these units will be located at the rear of the bus by the lift. This is always located at the front of the bus next to the driver's steering wheel. What this switch also does is it disengages the transmission so that in no way it's supposed to allow the bus to get engaged in drive or reverse in any way until this switch is turned back off. So we want to make the bus as safe as possible, keep it free from rolling, and so that's what this switch does, is it disengages the transmission, at the same time provides power to this unit so that you can operate the lift. Now when you go back and open the door, you're going to see this box, and you're going to usually access this control box at the back of the bus outside, standing in front of this door, this wheelchair lift. And you'll see at the top of the box there's an on and off switch, so you basically have a second on off switch that will give power to this unit here. And you turn that on, and you'll see 2 different switches at top and 2 different switches below. These 2 boxes will actually unfold or fold the lift back up, and these 2 switches here will actually raise or lower the lift itself. Whenever you see this unit being dropped down, and you actually are ready to put a student on the wheel, a student in a wheelchair onto the lift, you will actually wheel them on as if they're rolling on backwards with their back facing the bus. Whenever you take a student to take them off of the bus and to offload them at their home or at the school, their back is always going to still be facing the bus. In other words, the students are always facing out, whether they're coming on the bus or going off of the bus. Another feature on this particular lift is you're going to see this little platform or kind of a blocking device here, and this little lever looking platform here, it will actually lift up, and whenever you raise it up, this platform and this little level yellow platform, these are folded up. So in case the wheelchair is mobile, it will stop the wheels from going further off or on the wheelchair ramp itself. This little strap right here, it's a regular safety belt, seat belt looking apparatus, and this thing right here has got to be closed and snapped in place just like you would a regular seat belt. If this is not snapped appropriately in place, even if this is on and if this is on, it will not allow you to reach that, get that, operate this lift at all. So sometimes whenever you see this is on and this is certainly on and you're starting to push these buttons here and you're trying to figure out why the lift isn't functioning properly, the first best place to look is to make sure that this thing is snapped into place right here. And again, it's just like a regular seat belt. Whenever you actually lift the student up or lift the student down in the wheelchair, eventually you're going to need to make sure that the wheels of the wheelchair, those wheelchair locks are engaged and in place. We do not want that student moving around. And also, just to go back on the seatbelt item here, this is not necessarily going to touch the student. It's not going to come into contact, so it doesn't need to be securely on the student. All it is an additional barrier for to keep that student from moving forward if for some reason that wheelchair begins to move whatsoever in any way. So we've got several safety items in place. There's a plate in the back, there's this plate in the front, and this belt strap that will keep the student from moving forward or backward. But also, in addition to all that, we want to make sure the wheelchair straps, the wheelchair locks are engaged and keeping the wheels from moving forward at all. And that's kind of an overview. You'll get a chance to operate this apparatus. Remember, though, that you and your driver, whether you're the attendant or the driver, you two are a team. And one of you will step out whenever you're picking up or dropping off a student in a wheelchair. One of you will have to be stepping outside, and the other one's going to be inside taking care of the wheelchair straps or beginning to take care of the wheelchair straps. And you as a team will need to determine who's going to be outside operating this and who's going to be inside taking care of the things on the inside of the bus. Speaking of the inside of the bus, let's get to our wheelchair floor straps. And you've been introduced already to the video that talked about these different wheelchair floor straps. The wheelchair floor straps that you see will have this little button right there, and we'll talk about that button here in a second. And they're going to be blue in color. This is a self-ratcheting system. Once you hook this particular S hook to the frame, remember we talked about the main structural frame of the wheelchair. Once you hook this up, this is an automatic ratcheting system. In other words, every time you hear a bump on the bus, you might hear it click, and it's just meaning that this particular device is getting tighter and tighter and more secure. It will attach down to the bottom of the floor in these tracking systems down below, and to release it, to actually unhook the S hook from the structural main frame, you'll need to push down on this red button just like this person is doing here, so that it will begin to release this ratchet right here, so that you can actually take the S hook off of the main structural main frame. Again, these are the L-track systems here. This is what we have on all of our buses. This is a different look of this little locking device. It's not going to look exactly like this part down here. It's got these little gold color finish to it. And this little thing here, this apparatus, this plunger thing will actually slide up so that you can put them in and out of the L-track system itself. But that's kind of a closer look of our tracking systems on our bus. Again, a little bit of a review that you will see on our school bus on that video. Now, we talked about the structural mainframe, and the best way to realize what a structural mainframe is you want to look at a wheelchair from the perspective of anything that can attach through a bolt, a screw, or some kind of other apparatus that will attach. And if you took all of these things off, like the wheel, these front wheels, these armrests, this backrest, all of these things, all you would be left with is the structural main frame. And that is the only place that you will attach an S hook from a floor strap. Again, the structural main frame. These bolts here that attach the wheelchair, or the wheel to the wheelchair structural main frame, they have not been crash test certified. The bolts that hold the back brace in place, or the back panel of the wheelchair or the backrest, these bolts here have not been crash test certified. And so anything that can screw on or off is not an item that you would actually hook up to a structural main frame. However, there is one exception, and that is these little devices here. Again, I said the rule of thumb, if it's screwed on or bolted on, don't attach it, except for these little eye hooks here that you see right here, these eye holes. that have a little symbol for a hook to actually get placed to, you can attach those to these items as long as they are attached to the structural main frame, and it has this certification or this verification that it has actually been used and placed there to attach your wheelchair, the floor strap S-hooks to. And the reason we say it's okay is these bolts here, as opposed to the bolt here and the bolts that attach the other items on the wheelchair, these bolts here have been crash tested and they are certified bolts to withstand a front end or rear end collision. So whenever you see those, go ahead and use those. If these things are not present, you need to be sure and attach the S-hooks to the structural main frame. Now let's talk about the floor tracks for a minute. This is a top view of a wheelchair, a person in a wheelchair, and as you're looking at it, I want you to understand the concept of the floor tracks. You're going to see four sets of, or four individual floor tracks, and I want you to group them in sets of two. I want you to group the floor tracks in groups of two on the inside of the wheels, and then I want you to group the other two floor tracks in groups of two on the outside of the wheels. And so you have two sets on the inside of the wheels, and you have two sets on the outside of the, or a set of two on the outside of the wheel. So let me repeat myself because I might have misled you. You have a set of two on the inside of the wheels. That's the front and the back wheels, two tracks on the inside, and then you have two sets on the outside of the front and back wheels. These two on the inside are a pair, and these two on the outside are a pair. And it's important to understand that so that you can always remember, where am I going to put the actual floor straps? So when you get ready to put the floor straps, I want you to see the two outside tracks are going to be used on the front, okay? The two outside are going to be used on the front. So you use this outside track to hook up to the front on the inside and hook up on the front on the wheel on the structural main frame here. I also want you to see the location of the S-hook itself. The S-hook is pointed in toward the student or toward the wheel, and I want you to see how these knobs are facing. These knobs are faced on the outside. So remember, on the front you use the two outside tracks with the hooks facing in and the knobs facing out. Now in the back, it's the exact opposite. You will use the inside tracks for the back floor tracks, and you're going to have the hooks facing out, away from or toward the wheels, or outside away from the track, and you're going to see the knobs are facing in toward each other. Okay? So in the front, look here, hooks are facing in toward each other, the knobs are facing out, and you're using the outside tracks. In the back, you're putting the tracks on the inside, or you're putting the floor straps on the inside tracks with the hooks facing away from each other and the knobs facing in. They're basically just they're just the opposite from the front to the back. And the reason this is important is we want to make sure that these knobs, if you had them facing out and you were too close to the wheelchair here, you don't want these wheels coming into contact with these floor tracking systems at all. In some cases it might come into contact depending on how many wheelchairs you have on the bus. So we want to try to avoid these two coming into contact or being stopped with the wheels. The other thing is if you were to put these on the wheelchair straps on the outside here, you would be in danger of these straps actually coming into contact with the wheel. We want all of our straps as much as possible to not be twisted. We want to make sure that our straps are not coming into contact with any part of the wheelchair or any other devices as much as possible. And so this is kind of how we try to avoid that, by making sure that the front wheels, the front straps are located on the outside straps with the hooks facing in and the knobs facing out. We want to make sure that in the back that the knobs are facing in with the hooks facing out, and these are placed on the inside tracks in the back of the school bus as far as that is concerned. And so that's just a real quick idea and a lesson to kind of help you memorize, where do I always put my wheelchair straps. Now remember, I told you, you are a team, you and your driver. At this point in time, you might have a driver that's right now, when you start working on the wheelchair and the straps, that driver is either putting the door up or trying to take the door down. And whenever you're getting a student in place, it might be helpful that while the driver is putting the wheelchair ramp in place and closing that door, or whoever the other person is, that the other person, usually the attendant, is starting to work on this back portion right here. By the time the driver gets done, hopefully that driver will be getting up here and maybe helping you with the front and getting all this stuff done. But there's still another thing of securement you need to take care of, because all of this stuff does, again, as you and your driver are working together, is it just secures the chair in place. What I want you to realize now is this student, the occupant in this wheelchair, in the event of a crash, has not been secured. What you need to realize is that in a front-end collision, this chair will will remain on the bus in a front-end collision, but it doesn't mean the student is going to stay in the chair. So we need to do something to keep this student in the chair, and that's where we have to come into contact with this 3-point shoulder and lap belt assembly. It doesn't matter if the student has a seat belt in the chair or even a 5-point harness in the chair. Those seat belts and harness systems that you see in the chair are only equipped and left on that chair to help keep the student secure in the chair and to keep them upright. It is not necessarily crash test certified to help endure a front end or rear end collision. So this is where we have to assemble this front end assembly. And this is a little bit of a picture of how you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to install a box here, a ratcheting box here. There's going to be another point that you have to assemble here, and doing all this to try to get that 3-point assembly in place. And you're going to get more hands-on experience with that. But I want you to realize that just because you have these 4 blue straps in place, and I want you to observe outside track, inside track, everything is kind of where it needs to be, and everything's hooked up to the structural main frame. We still need to go through the process of putting this student in a 3-point shoulder lap belt assembly. And this is where I want you to realize that on the back of these boxes right here, it's not going to look like this system here. Where you see these boxes here is what this box is right here. And what I want you to see here is that you're going to have to use this little button and attach and slide over this button hook as a part of this shoulder strap assembly. And so I want to just give you an introduction to that, and whenever you see more practice time in the future, you'll get a better understanding of what this whole assembly is about. But it's important for the purpose of this training right now is to make sure that you're not only securing the chair in the bus, you need to secure the student in the chair that is a chair that is secured to the bus. It takes 2 parts to do that. Now sometimes whenever you're trying to secure a wheelchair, you may have a difficult time reaching the structural main frame with your S-hook. That's where these quick straps come in handy here. And in this quick strap, you can kind of loop it through just like you see here around the main structural main frame. And at that point in time, right here is where you would hook up your S-hook, and that it would be just as secure as actually hooking it up to the structural main frame. But make sure that if you ever have a difficult time reaching your S-hook to a part of the structural main frame, that when you use this quick strap, that it is always attached to a part of the structural main frame. We're not going to put it back here by this wheel or put it in someplace else that's not part of the structural main frame. In addition, we still have some other devices apart from the wheelchair that we want to make you aware of. We have something called a medicine bottle cap cover. This device is used to slip over a regular seat belt button or the seatbelt release latch. And sometimes you have kids that they see a red button or they see a button on their seatbelt, and it's just very enticing for them to push that down, or maybe they are just trying to get themselves off of that school bus and they've learned how to remove the seatbelt because they want to get themselves out of that seat for whatever reason. And again, remember, these are kids with special needs. It's been determined that these students need to be secured on a school bus in some form or fashion. And these kids may not always have the capacity to realize that unbuckling their seatbelt is wrong in the middle of a trip. And if they continue to do that, what we'll do is we'll find another means of securement to put this over the actual seatbelt itself, and you'll snap it into place. And what that does is it covers up that button where the student cannot push the seatbelt release button. These knobs here, or these these caps here, that's the word I'm trying to look for, they function just like a Tylenol bottle or a medicine bottle cap. You will push down on it and you will twist it just like a regular medicine bottle cap. Excuse me. And it will actually let off and release itself, and you will simply open this device here up, just like it opens up like a little kind of unfolds, I guess, if is a better term there, and you will take that off where you can actually release that. And so that's just another device that might come in handy. We don't do this for every student who uses a seat belt, but for those students that have a hard time keeping themselves, keeping that seatbelt on, we will utilize that. But it has to be processed and it has to be authorized by management, as also not just management, but people who deal with this student on a more regular basis. You and I, as employees of the school district, we can't just make a determination that a student needs that and put that on there. It must be authorized before we assign this to a student in some form of fashion. Now let's talk about just special programs, general responsibilities. Again, you as an attendant or you as a special programs driver, you're a team. You have to work together. Hopefully you will get along and develop a good, healthy working relationship. Sometimes days will be better than others, and we understand that. But you always have to be working together as a team to make sure students are secure. It's not a job where both you and the driver or your attendant are going to be just sitting there and letting the other person do the work. Virtually just about every stop, especially when it comes to wheelchair responsibilities, both people are going to have to get up out of their seat. You as an attendant, you will have to get up out of your seat at every single stop, and you're going to be responsible to make sure the students are getting on and off the bus. You're going to have to make sure that the student is getting securely mounted or securely situated in their seat. And so those are some of the responsibilities that we want to touch base on. And I want to specifically talk to you about attendance. And drivers, if you're watching this, I want you to help you understand kind of the function of the attendants and helping them understand that they're there to help, but they also have responsibilities that you need to allow them to fulfill. Sometimes attendants, you're going to be asked to pre-trip a bus as needed. You may not need to do it as thoroughly. Well, let me rephrase that. You are not expected to know every inch of that bus, but you do need to have a working knowledge enough of the bus, and you'll get plenty of time to practice in your experience to pre-trip a bus, because sometimes the driver is running a little bit late. So if you can go out there and make sure the bus is safe for transporting students, that helps quite a bit. And so you'll need to know, make sure that things like lug nuts and tires are properly inflated, making sure doors are working like they're supposed to, making sure all the lights are working like they're supposed to. And a lot of times you will do this as a team, and you will be working together as a driver and attendant. But sometimes, depending on schedules, one of the drivers or the attendant might be running late, and you may need to be required to do this by yourself. And we'll give you more information about that later. Attendants will always be required to spot the bus when it is backing up. It doesn't matter if it's in the parking lot, whether it's in a neighborhood or wherever it is. If a bus needs to go in reverse, the attendant needs to spot the bus driver backing up. And you can do it from the inside at the back of the bus watching, or you can actually get out and help the bus driver back up. But either way, the attendant is always required to spot the bus when it's in reverse or backing up. Your job is also to help students get into seats and seat securements as an attendant. Both of you will work together when it comes to a wheelchair, but when it comes to the seat belts and the star seats, usually the driver will remain in their seat once they pull up to the stop, and the attendant will need to step to the door and get out of the bus, and you will actually help the student get on the bus and help them get to their seat and confirm that they are securely in their seat securement. If they need help getting it done, we'll then help them do it. Remember, the back of your hand is always facing them. But at the same time, if a student is independent enough, give them the opportunity to get it done themselves in a timely manner. But you're always going to help students get into their seat securements. And then while they're driving down the road, your job as an attendant is to observe students while in transit. You're going to be watching these students. You're going to check to make sure there's no behavior issues. You're going to make sure there's no health issues. Sometimes a student can zone out, and you need to be aware of that. If they are typically engaged in the bus route or the transportation or with other students, and suddenly they find find themselves zoning out for an extended period of time, that might be what's called a grand mal seizure. Other safety issues, you might want to be you're always being observant, making sure that the students, for their safety, or where they need to be, doing what they're supposed to be. When you get to a stop, you're going to help them exit the bus. Please get off the bus and have the students step down towards you so that you're there to catch them in case they fall forward. As much as possible, you want to refrain from touching students when avoidable. It's not always going to be avoidable, but if there's unnecessary contact with the students, we need to avoid that. If a student comes and gives you a hug, do enough to receive and acknowledge that hug, and then let them go down their merry way and enjoy their day. You want to be careful when students are hugging you, not to push them away and say that's against school policy, because that student may be so distrusting of you the rest of the school year that becomes a volatile issue on the school bus. So you want to use common sense in that area. I would be careful and advise strongly not to engage or initiate the touching of a student if at all possible. Every time you're on that bus, you're going to also, as attendants, make sure you're sitting behind the very last student on the bus. So if the last student on the bus is on the second row, you need to be on the third row. If the last student is on the fourth row, you need to be on the fifth row. We want somebody from the front, which is the driver, able to observe everything from the front, and we need somebody from the very back behind the last student observing everything from the back. So make sure you're behind the last student on the bus. And then at the same time, anytime students are on the bus, we need to make sure all cell phones, reading, any kind of handicrafts, any other activities that you might use to help pass time, all those things need to be put away. If there's no students on the bus, feel free to engage those type of items, but whenever students are on the bus, all those things please need to be put up as well. And then some other special programs policies we want to make sure everybody is aware of. Number one, whenever you're dropping off a special needs student, that is a student who is identified on your roster as a special needs student, there must be an authorized receiver present to receive that child. Now remember, you will have special needs students on your school bus as well as regular education students on your bus. This does not apply to regular education students except for this, and I know this is going to be confusing. If that student is a first grade, pre-K, kindergarten, or first grade student, that student must also have an authorized receiver as well. So any special education students or special needs students, as well as pre-K, kindergarten, first grader, all of those students must have an authorized receiver present to receive that child. Secondly, no special needs student is to ever cross the street, even when they are escorted. Door-to-door service is required. So our school bus door is going to face the door of the student's home. Again, remember that you will have regular education students on the school bus, and your roster is going to reflect special education student or special needs student versus regular education student. If it's a regular education student, they are permitted to cross the street. But a special needs student can never, ever cross the street, even if you want to walk them themselves. Here's the other thing. Let's say you have a special education or special needs student on the school bus with a 15-year-old regular education student. And the regular education student says, look, I can walk them across the street. And the answer is always no. No special needs student is to ever cross the street. Again, we ask you to refrain from touching special program students whenever avoidable. We never want to leave a student on the bus unattended, and that's just across the board. It doesn't matter if it's special programs or regular education programs. We need somebody on that bus who is responsible, be it the bus driver or the school bus attendant. If you show up to a campus and one of you needs to step out because you have a personal need that you need to attend to, both of you cannot get off that bus at the same time. One of you needs to remain on that bus when students are present. After every run, please be sure and check your bus when you're done picking and dropping off kids at the elementary school age level or the middle school age level or the high school. Always look under your bus, walk your bus. No matter how big and open it looks, make sure you're checking your bus for any student left behind. In the special program binders and confidentiality, you're going to have these route binders that are in the color of red. And inside of that, you're going to see different items that are relevant to each student's name, their address, whether they're special programs or special needs students, or whether they're regular education students, and you know that there's a difference in how you're going to drop those students off and on the bus. The other thing you're going to see, especially when it comes to special program students, is you're going to see specific things as far as what their restrictions are regarding seat securement, or what is permissive for them to do as far as seat securement is concerned. These are all confidential issues. You'll also read about things about what difficulties the student has adapting to the school bus environment. These are all confidential things. The attendant usually will maintain this and keep it up to date and making sure that it is in order. But you and the bus driver and the attendant need to work together to make sure it's exactly in order the way it should be. And you never step off of that bus and talk about that with each other or talk about it outside of your job hours. And then inside that special programs is also something called a Medicaid sheets. These Medicaid sheets are basically rosters and roles that you will literally take attendance of, and the names of the the names of the regular education students will not be on there, but the names of the special needs students will be on there, and you basically need to confirm that that student rode that bus that day or not. If they rode the bus, you're going to simply put a check. If they did not ride the bus, you're going to put an O for out. And that lets everybody know that that student was there or not. And this is how we get our funding from Medicaid for transporting students with special needs. That's going to pretty much wrap up the two modules for special needs. There's a whole lot of other things that we need to talk about that I do want everybody to continue to look forward to in your future modules. But as far as specific special needs, I hope you've gotten some healthy information from Module 5 and Module 6, the two sections dealing with special needs. We look forward to continue helping you train and grow and get more acclimated to life at Mansfield Independent School District Training Department.